The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and so thrilled to be here with you guys this morning. It is the Wednesday, the week before Thanksgiving, and I love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year. I hope that you guys do too. We're not quite yet in Christmas, but close enough that if you want to do Christmas decorations, you can, and nobody's going to arrest you. You know what I'm saying? I love this time of year, and I love it because it's our toy guide time of year. And I hope that everybody remembers to just be a little bit nicer to everybody. That's my hope. So anyway, I'm Shannon Penrod. I am the proud pony that is the host of Autism Live. Pony stands for PONI. That's parent of a neurodiverse individual. Those are the words that my son and I have arrived at to describe my relationship to his diagnosis as a child, and hopefully everyone gets to pick the words to describe themselves and their relationship. We here at Autism Live on the Autism Network, our mission is always to provide information and inspiration. That's really what we're about. That's our entire mission statement in a nutshell. And we want to do that for that larger autism community, individuals that are themselves on the autism spectrum, but also the people who love them. That's what we are about here. We've got a pretty interesting show for you today. We had guests that were scheduled to be with us, and I was really looking forward to talking with them. A wonderful couple that describes themselves as being neurodiverse, that live in Israel, and that we've had a couple of times that we were going to connect with them, and I guess it just didn't work out and they needed to cancel. So on the fly, yesterday, Chris and I were putting our heads together, and I said, I know what I really, really, really want to talk about today. And so later on, I'm going to be talking about my top tips, not only for a GFCF, a gluten-free, casein-free Thanksgiving, but also just for getting through the Thanksgiving holiday with the person that you love on the spectrum, especially if they're a young kiddo, and not having it go south. So buckle up. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But want to remind all of you that we're live right now. It is Wednesday, November 20th. And as I said, I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I was just remembering it's a very important person's birthday today that I have to call them. But anyway, thrilled to be here with you. It is 2024. I didn't say that. And we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our fabulous Chris Desmond was already starting to show you some of the places that you can be listening, some of the places that you can be watching. For those of you that are watching live, again, you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or a couple of other sites that we are live on. For those of you who are listening to us in podcast, you can see on the screen. Well, no, you can't see on the screen if you're listening in podcasts. We're available pretty much wherever you download podcasts for free. That we are for free. The cost of because it is a cost to download it, but it doesn't come to you. We defray that cost with sponsors. So when you're listening in podcasts, you'll hear interruptions that are for commercial breaks. We hope you embrace that and say, woohoo, they're paying so that I don't have to. If that really is something that leaves you fatoutsed and you say, I really want to just be able to listen to it and not be interrupted, and I'd really rather pay a little bit myself, please feel free to jot on over to glow.fm/autismlive. For $5 a month, you get everything that we do on the Autism Network, Autism Live, Ask Dr. Doreen, and any other shows that we do, and that goes directly to your inbox, and they are without ads for $5 a month. It's a pretty good deal. It's actually even cheaper if you sign up for a whole year, or you can do it monthly. It's up to you. So that takes care of all of that. I want to jump to the jargon of the day because we have a lot to talk about today. But we do jargon of the day because sometimes it's so befuddling, right? Somebody's talking to you about your health, your mental health, or your child's health, or your child's mental health or their behavioral health, and they're using words. Sometimes they're words that you've never heard of before, right? And you go to look them up in a dictionary, they're not in the dictionary because they're a very specific jargon word, right? Other times there's a word that you're like, I know this word, I've seen this word, I use this word, it's a word that I consider my own, but what does this actually, I don't understand the context of what this means with my child. That's what today's jargon term is. The term is inhibition. And, we use this term all the time. I think it's a pretty common term, but as it relates to autism, perhaps different, a little nuanced, different than we might have realized. And something that, like, I know I was a theater kid, right? And I went to college and graduate school for theater, and they would always talk about, release your inhibitions and do, do whatever it is that you want to do if you're doing a scene. Let it go, release your inhibitions. But we're going to actually teach our kids to use inhibition. So let's take a look at what our jargon term is so that we get a little bit closer to this. So we start now with our Google AI. Inhibition, or inhibitory control, I hope I'm saying that right, is the ability to suppress impulsive or automatic responses and create responses using attention and reasoning. It's a cognitive ability and executive function that helps with behavioral control, anticipation, planning, and goal setting. Oh my goodness. That's a mouthful. And I'm sure that we're going to be on two sides of this, because some people are like, well, wait a minute, I got to suppress who I am. But it is for the person's benefit. It is for the person's benefit that they will inhibit a response so that they don't go to jail, right? There are some rules that society has that says, hey, you can't just walk up and punch somebody in the nose because you're angry, right? Or you go to jail. Those are just what the rules are. So we're talking about those kinds of things. Inhibiting a response for the benefit of the person themselves. So before everybody loses their mind about that, let's move on to our next definition and see if it gets a little closer for us. Inhibition in psychology, conscious or unconscious constraint or curtailment of a process or behavior, especially of impulses or desire. So that's from botanica.com. So the example that I always give, and my son does not like this example, but I think he'll forgive me, is that it was around this time of year. We were in a grocery store getting Thanksgiving supplies, and there was a gentleman who was in line in front of us in the store, and my son was probably 4. So I think everybody will excuse him for not knowing better, but the gentleman who was in line ahead of us had a ginormous nose. I am talking, I have never, not in a Cyrano movie, seen a nose the size, and it wasn't just long, it was big. It was a big, big nose. This poor man, what he must have gone through in his life, because there was no way not to notice it. And everybody who was in line, everybody who was in the store was noticing it. And then my 4-year-old chimes up and goes, that man's nose is huge, right? Because he was 4 and also, on the spectrum and didn't know better. And I'm trying to distract him and shush him and like, hey, look at me. I'm making funny face, anything. He's like, but Mom, did you see that man's nose is huge? So we went out to the parking lot and we had a conversation. Now he was 4 and on the spectrum, and that kind of language was relatively new for him. Let's remember that. And when you're trying to get someone to learn to talk, it seems crazy that you would ever want to inhibit them from saying anything, right? But the fact of the matter is for their own good, we have to protect them and teach them, hey, we don't say everything that's in our minds, right? And we don't do everything that we feel like doing. I don't know why, but the thing of Ariana Grande licking the donut just popped to mind, right? We don't, like me, we may all want to lick the donuts, but really we don't do that. There's some things that behaviorally are frowned upon, right? Because it's not good for society. So I had to have a discussion with my son about, people, and we've been working on this anyway, that people have feelings, and that when we draw attention to things that make them different, we have to be very careful about that, right? My son picked it up better than I did. And so even now, but especially when he was little, sometimes I would say something. I remember saying to one person that they were up on stage and they were giving a speech. And then afterwards we went backstage to see them. And I was wearing heels, and I'm a very big woman, big, tall, and wide and everything. And then you put me in heels and, I'm ginormous. And this person is a very petite person. And because I was feeling self-conscious about my size, I said to her, "Oh my goodness, I forget, how tiny you are." And my son was like, "Why are you commenting on her physicality? And this is inappropriate and rude." So our kids learn it. But he had to learn to inhibit. We all need to some degree learn, okay, some of my responses, which are very quick, right? When people are in a haunted house and somebody jumps out at them and they punch, right? That's an automatic response that they need to learn how to control, or they're going to get kicked out of the haunted house, right? You can't be doing stuff like that. So teaching inhibition is teaching a cognitive process of everything I say, everything I think I don't say, everything I feel I don't act on. I pick and choose for the benefit of myself, so I don't get into trouble. Good morning to Autism Journey with Elijah. She says, "Oh no, my son points out things like that. We were in a grocery store line and an old man was in front of us. My son yelled out, 'That man farted,' really loud. Everyone heard him. It was a moment I will never forget." Yeah, I mean, I think all kids go through that phase, but in order to teach that particular inhibition, we have to teach the perspective taking of, here's you and you're thinking and feeling things and you're seeing these things. And here's this other person who's there. They're thinking and feeling and seeing things, and he farted. Do you think he wanted to keep that secret, or do you think he wanted everybody to know? Right? So that we have that whole conversation. And it's not just a conversation, it's lots of fun lessons too, to help them to learn, okay, just because I see it, just because I hear it, doesn't mean that I don't say something. But sometimes I do, right? So it becomes this real cognitive thing where they have to weigh and measure. And do we get it right? Any of us? Always? No. So, we can't expect our kiddos to get it 100% of the time right either. But inhibition is a very important lesson for those of you who your kiddos are having a very hard time emotionally regulating. This is a part of that as well too. That it's that tightrope of I don't like when we ever say to a child, "Stop crying," right? First of all, it's very hard to stop something and not do something, right? It's much easier to do something else. So if the child is crying, and first of all, I like to, let them have their feelings and find words. What are you feeling? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling scared? Those kinds of things. Excuse me. Pardon me. But, if there's a part of it where they're feeling the frustration and they're, for instance, throwing the iPad, we need to help them to understand that, you're having a real emotion. I don't think we should poo-poo that. You're having a real emotion, but what can you do with that emotion? Instead of saying, "Stop yelling, stop throwing things," if I'm feeling something, stopping something, not doing something, very hard to do. Doing something else is much easier to do. So I love all the things where we, teach a child, here are your 5 choices. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? With your feelings, much more appropriate. All of that is part of inhibition. We're inhibiting our immediate response to something that allows us to spiral out of control. So there we go. But again, for the benefit of the individual, for the benefit of the individual. Okay, so there's our jargon of the day. So we're going to pause for a second and look at our toy guide video. We're so excited. I want you guys to know that next Tuesday and Wednesday, it's the Festival of Toys. We're going to show everything. And then we're going to highlight a couple of toys in the month of December. But you'll see all of the toys across the 2 days. On Tuesday, it's going to be the baby, toddler, and preschool toys. And on Wednesday, it's everything else. Some of our top favorites from the toy guide. But the toy guide is live right now. But check out this video, and then we'll come back and talk about Thanksgiving tips.
The wait is over. All month from now until the new year, join Shannon for Autism Live's 2024 Toy Guide Review. Shannon will break down the award-winning toys in multiple age groups, where to buy them, and how your purchase can help the Autism Network continue to provide information and inspiration to families this holiday season.
I love to watch babies play with toys. It's my fave. Okay. So I started out yesterday. I was like, well, let's talk a little bit about the gluten-free, casein-free Thanksgiving, right? But then I realized halfway through it, I was like, it gets so specific, and I wanted to make sure that I gave just general tips for I don't know. I wasn't going to run through them quick. I don't think I'm going to, because I don't think it works with this one. But let's go ahead and get started with this first slide, because this is the critical thing. You got to keep it simple. And I left the slide simple to remind all of us, you got to keep it simple. Sometimes we get planning and we start to get this picture in our head of a Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving, and that it's all going to be whatever the picture is in your head, and you're cooking 42 things. And when you have dietary restrictions, it might be, well, I'm going to make the gluten-free, dairy-free pumpkin pie, but I also need to make one for people who aren't. I'm just going to caution you that you really want to keep it simple. And if that's really the case, that you need a gluten-free pumpkin pie, is it something that you can purchase? Or the other one, is it something you can purchase, or can somebody else be responsible for that? Because you can really be there and be present at this holiday, or you can exhaust yourself. I've been guilty of that many, many years. I'm trying really hard not to do that this year. So let's all take a moment and a breath and say, I promise myself I'm going to keep it simple so that I can be present for this holiday, and many more, hopefully. Okay, so that's my overreaching rule. So now let's go on to the next one. Let's talk turkey. Because I know what the story is, right? That gluten-free, casein-free, because casein is the protein in milk. So I'll interchange, say, dairy-free or casein-free. People tend to say, but it's so hard to be dairy-free, and especially, Thanksgiving dinner, and however will we do this? I just want to put it out there. I listed 3 specific turkeys that are all butterball, that are all gluten-free, and there's no dairy in them. There's no butter in a butterball turkey. I know. I didn't know that either. And they have a hotline. You can always check. I did check on their website yesterday to make sure that these 3, this holiday season, 2024, are gluten-free and dairy-free. But I always encourage you to check for yourself, read the labels, make sure. Were these the only gluten-free turkeys? No, there are so many. Like pretty much every single brand has a turkey now that is gluten-free and dairy-free. But you got to read the labels, because they have different varieties. They even have some that come with a gravy package that it is also gluten-free. This is unheard of for me, but I guess it's the truth. But if you're cooking the turkey, you can easily get, I think anywhere in the United States, any grocery store, you can get a butterball turkey. So I know for sure that your main dish is starting out being gluten-free and dairy-free. But a lot of people put butter on their turkeys. So if you're eating at somebody else's house, who was it that was on a show or something, a friend of mine that it was Seth Meyers was saying, you always have your brother-in-law who shows up and they're like vegan and they're all these other things and they're healthy and is it organic? And that his brother shows up for Thanksgiving and says, is there any butter on the turkey? And that Seth Meyers said, it's Thanksgiving. There's butter in everything. And that's probably true if you're going to somebody else's house. So that you got to look out for. But if you're doing it at your house, you do not have to do butter on your turkey. I will tell you that somebody taught me the trick for cooking turkeys and chicken, and whole turkeys and whole chickens. And this is what I do. So with a turkey, obviously, you thaw it out and follow all the rules. Don't put it on the counter. You got to thaw it in the refrigerator days in advance, right? And you do the whole configuration of how many pounds, how many days. Take it seriously. I always think it's going to thaw faster than it does. They have it down to a science, right? But then you clean wash the whole turkey. I don't do stuffing inside the bird. I stuff with oranges. And I've tried other fruits too. I've done plums and things of that nature. But the oranges are really the best thing. And usually I do two, one in the main cavity and one in the neck cavity. And first I heat the oranges up in the microwave. I poke a lot of holes in them so that they can leak easily. And I do organic oranges because you're leaving the skin on, right? And I throw that in the bird. It's an automatic baster. You don't have to be basting away because it's automatically basting. Then I do the Martha Stewart thing where there's the skin of the turkey and you can stick your hand. If you poke, you can stick your hand between the meat and the skin. And I do that. And instead, a lot of people use butter. I don't do that. I use olive oil. Same effect, less salt, better for you, and we're not doing the dairy. It's that easy. And then I cook my turkeys and my chickens upside down. By the way, when I do this with chickens, I do it with lemons in the cavities, right? But turkey, I do with an orange. I cook it upside down. You cook it breast down, and I make a bed of vegetables. Instead of, you can have a basting tray where it sits up a little bit out, but you don't want it to be pressed against the bottom of the pan. It's going to cook better if it's a little bit higher. But I put it on a bed of vegetables. There's carrots, onions, potatoes, whatever, and cook it upside down. Now, does it make the pretty turkey in this picture? I got to be honest with you, it does not. And if I'm having a bunch of people over, I cook one turkey to be on the platter to look like that. That's not the turkey that I serve. I use that for leftovers later on. The turkey that I serve is the one that's cooked upside down. It will be the moistest turkey you ever have eaten in your entire life. No butter. No butter. You don't need butter. So again, cook it upside down, breast side down. The top, you will get crisp skin across the top, but the meat that's in the legs has so much more natural juice in it that it won't get dried out, and that breast will just fall off the bone and be wonderful. So if you're cooking the turkey, you can do that, but keep it simple. It does not, I love to cook a turkey because it takes 15 minutes to get it in the oven, and then that's it. That's pretty much it. You don't have to do anything else. I also put some chicken broth over it as well. Not a lot. And for the first 2 hours, I cook it with the lid on. So it steams it. It's whole. I'll throw some herbs in, and the whole house smells fabulous. And you can easily do that gluten-free and casein-free. But sometimes you're going to somebody else's house and they have slathered the whole thing in butter. So I think on the next slide, I guess that's not how I ordered the slides. I said, remember that this day is not about the food. It's about gathering. I really messed this up. It's about gratitude and connection. So that's supposed to be towards the end, but let's go on to the next one. Let's see what mishmash I've created here. What's the next slide? Okay. So you're eating at somebody else's house and you've got a kiddo or a couple of people that you're trying very hard to be very clean. You don't even know if they're having butter on their turkey. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I always, when I was doing that, I would go to Whole Foods, but you can go to pretty much any place where they have a butcher, and you just ask for a couple of turkey legs. and then you roast your turkey legs, basically the same kind of thing. Throw herbs on them and throw some chicken broth on them and roast them in the oven. They'll come out looking somewhat like this without the garnish. And you take those. And I have a slide later on that talks about this, but I encourage you, if you're bringing something like that, bring a little extra, what your kiddo needs plus a little extra, because everybody always wants to taste your food. I don't know what that's about, but they do. It looks good and they're like, oh, I want some. And you can say to the host, you can either say, hey, we're on a very specific diet, and so this is how this is going to work this year. I don't want you to have to change anything. I'm going to bring some turkey legs separate. Is that okay? They may say no need, I don't use butter, or they may say perfectly fine, whatever. Or you can just say to them, if you don't want to have the whole diet conversation, you can say, do you mind? Because my child will only eat the legs. And I know there's only 2, and I know, sometimes other people want them. So I'm going to bring a couple of turkey legs just for him. Is that okay with you? Right? It's so much easier than having to negotiate it. I'm telling you, cooking a couple of turkey legs in the oven, super duper easy. And I don't know what it is about the bone, and it's prehistoric. Kids tend to love that. Okay. Esther, I'm so happy to see you here. She says, do you have a nutritionist or feeding specialist for picky eaters you recommend in Los Angeles who comes to your home? I'm going to have to think about that, Esther. And thank you. I want you to know that at the All Ghouls Gala, I ran and got my son, and I came back and I could never find you again. So I don't know what happened. But, and Autism Journey with Elijah, thank you. Go on the Butterball. And Rosie, hello. So thrilled that you're here. Okay, so let's continue on with talking about Thanksgiving and how we're going to keep ourselves sane. So then we've got the turkey under control. It's not going to be hard. Then we move on to stuffing, and this becomes a big issue for a lot of people. And I'm just going to tell you, don't let it become a big issue. If your child likes and will eat stuffing, no, let's stop there, because it may be that your child doesn't and that it's not a big deal, in which case, don't worry about it. Let go. Let it go. Like Elsa, right? Let it go. Not all kids like stuffing, but a lot of kids love stuffing. And if your child wants stuffing, you can make it yourself with gluten-free bread, or you just they sell this at almost every grocery store. Now, I happen to use this particular brand. There are a couple of other brands. I will tell you that there are brands that they're gluten-free, but they aren't dairy-free. And they look really good, but if you're going dairy-free, you can't do that. You can order this on Amazon. But you can get it at any grocery store this week. It's expensive, let's admit that, but you don't have to make 7 boxes of it. You can make 1 box of it, and then you jazz this up however you like. You like apples in your stuffing? You go. You put your apples in there. My family, we always had an oyster sage dressing, and that was important to my mother. So when Jem was little, we would make that for him. So that's Thanksgiving to him. I get oysters and I put it in this stuffing, and I put chicken broth in it, and away we go. It's not hard. It's easier to make than a hamburger. It's no muss, no fuss. It's a mix. You put it in the casserole dish with the things that it has. You put the lid on it, you stick it in the oven. It's not a big deal. We keep it simple, right? We used to feature, this is how much this has changed in the years. It was maybe 14 years ago that we featured showing how to bake your own gluten-free bread and then crumble it to put in stuffing. My friends, we don't have to do that anymore. Let's save ourselves, as Eliana Benzon says, and get a box. It's not going to kill you, and it's gluten-free and it's dairy-free, but it's expensive. It's so much more than stovetop. Prepare yourself mentally for that, but it's good. It's good stuff. Okay, on to the next slide. There we go. You want pie. And so there are all kinds of mixes that you can get for pie crust, but I'm telling you, don't do it. Keep it simple. Most stores now, right now, even Trader Joe's has their wholly wholesome gluten-free pie crust. They come 2 to a pack, which is great. So you could make 2 pumpkin pies with this, or save one to make shepherd's pie in a couple of days, which we love for leftovers, where you put all the vegetables and the turkey and everything in the bottom, and then you cover it with mashed potatoes, bake that thing, and it's a great leftover thing. But if you wanted to make a double crust pie crust, you can easily do that with this. And the secret is to thaw them because they come frozen. And you have the one that's going to be the base, and you take the other one and you have a little bit of gluten-free flour. I like the one that's King Arthur, that's 1-to-1. You put it on your cutting board or your counter or your pastry rollout thing with a little bit of flour, and you dump the pie crust out onto it as gently as you can, and then you roll it out and slap it on the pie. And even my husband, who does not eat gluten-free, loves this pie crust. So it passes muster. It's a good pie crust. It's not as malleable as what you're used to in a regular pie crust, but if you roll it out with a little flour, you can get it there. Save yourself. Now, you can also buy a pie, but they're rudely expensive. And I don't know if it's what you want. And if there's a particular kind of pie that sometimes I used to love to make pies. And the day before Thanksgiving was all about making pies. I still kind of like to make pies, but I don't make my own pie crust anymore, and this is fine. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. And you can find this almost anywhere, including Trader Joe's. They have them this time of year. I love this. At our home, we have a cranberry war. We have to make fresh and buy cans of it. We have so much cranberry sauce left over. I love that. Cranberry sauce is very, very particular, right? My husband doesn't like the chunky one. It's got to be the jellied one. And where I grew up, my mother made a cranberry relish that we would have to grind cranberries and grind oranges, and I hated it. So it's not a part of our tradition anymore. We let it go. But I do like a nice fresh cranberry sauce with a little bit of chunk to it. But my husband will only do the jellies. Personal. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so from there, we start to talk about what makes the holiday for you. If you're going to make your priority list and think about, okay, I'm keeping it simple, but what's essential? I think for a lot of people, it's turkey, it's mashed potatoes, it's stuffing, it's pie. Tell me, and obviously for you guys, it's cranberries, right? For everybody, it's a little bit different. But you can start to substitute. You can pretty much make any dish that you make normally and just have a mind to substituting. So depending on what you're making, some of the substitutes we use for milk, juice, depending on what it is, it's not going to work at everything, right? You're not going to put juice in. Let's say you're making mashed potatoes and you normally put milk into the mashed potatoes. So you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put juice in, but you could put water. You could put any kind of nut milk that's in that would go in. But I'll tell you what I do is chicken broth in the mashed potatoes, or vegetable broth if I'm having people that are vegan. And I'll tell you what the fabulous Rachel Bird does. She takes the vegan boursin. Oh, stop. It's filled with herbs. She puts that in it instead of the milk. I know. Like, ooh, now we're talking, right? So depending on what you're making, here are just some of the different things that you could, but I didn't put chicken broth and vegetable broth on there. But if there's a particular dish you're wanting to make, write in and tell me what the ingredients are so that we can talk about what you could substitute things for, because I have seen it all now. I even have in my freezer, they make gluten-free phyllo dough now. I mean, 15 years ago, that would have been absolutely unheard of, but it's gluten-free, dairy-free phyllo dough. So, okay, on to the next one. So lots of things that you can substitute. If you're substituting for butter, as Seth Meyers said, everything has butter on it. Earth Balance is what we use at my house. There is, that's a butter substitute. There is, sometimes I use the Miyoko's, and there is now a Trader Joe's organic version of Earth Balance that I don't like as well, but it's okay. It's okay. And these melt. You can use it in the mashed potatoes. You can use it on, biscuits, and there are gluten-free biscuits, or there's the flour to make gluten-free biscuits if that's what you do. But if you're making a cake or something like that, and it calls for oil inside of it, or for butter inside of it, sometimes the olive oil will work. Or if it's a cake, I put applesauce in instead of the oil, and it 1-to-1. So if it's a half a cup of oil, I put a half a cup of applesauce in, and it's the moistest, most wonderful cake, and you don't have all those calories and all that fat added into it. So it depends on what you're making, what you would substitute. Do you know, is sweetened condensed milk or evaporated milk gluten-free? It should be. It absolutely should be. But it's not dairy-free. But you can now get or make dairy-free sweetened condensed milk with milk substitute. They have recipes for it on Pinterest. I was just looking at one the other day. Easy peasy to do. Okay, on to our next slide. So it really becomes a checklist at this point. What is important to cook? What can you buy? And what can you, like Elsa, let go of? I think a lot of us picture abundance with Thanksgiving, but I'm going to encourage you to picture abundance not so much in the food, but in laughter and in connection and people, and abundance of time, things of that nature. We're all supposed to be working on grateful. And I know that sugar, like from our childhood, we have this attachment to it. But I really worked very hard for a long time, not the whole time, with my son to not make things about sugar. I wish I extended it to food in general. But I see that when Thanksgiving comes around, it's not a sugar holiday to him. Halloween isn't either. And nor is Christmas, nor is Valentine's Day for that matter. There are other food things, but it's just not about sugar for him. And he doesn't have that attachment to it, which is a wonderful thing. Pinterest is so good for finding things. It's really amazing, you guys. Okay, I didn't talk about whipped cream because whipped cream is very personal. And a lot of people on Pinterest talk about making dairy-free whipped cream with that. I can never remember what it's called. It's like aquafab. It's when you take the juice from the leftover liquid from a can of beans and you turn that into a whipped cream. My friends, I'm just going to tell you, that is not a good idea. That I don't care how much sugar you put in it, you're going to have some serious gas, and you don't want that. They make a lovely canned coconut whipped cream that looks, acts, and tastes just like regular whipped cream, and you won't be, tooting yourself through the holiday. So keep it simple. Buy the thing of the coconut whipped cream. All right. Onward to the next slide. How can you include your children, family? So if you think about this holiday and as you're doing the planning for what it is that you're going to cook, I want you to think and start editing going, yep, we don't need that. We can have that the next day. We're not going to have it Thanksgiving Day, right? It can be a whole weekend where you have different tastes and different things, but it all doesn't have to be ready for Thanksgiving. You edit away. But then when you look at what you have left, ask yourself, how can I include people in my family with that? For instance, can you include them in setting the table? You absolutely can. You can include any child of any ability. It just means there needs to be a certain level of support, and maybe you don't bring out the fine china. But let the fine china go in favor of inclusion, right? But have them help you set the table. Have them help you clear the table. I love that years ago I did an interview with a mom who had written a cookbook, and she talked about, she made this very incredibly dense fruit cake, and there were nuts and raisins in it, and she had a mortar and a pestle, and she would put the nuts and the raisins and the spices in, and she would have the kids work the mortar and the pestle to grind them. And she said it was great for their fine motor, but they also got the smells of it, and they were included. And when we include our children in the food that we're preparing, they're more likely to eat it. So I'm going to think, Esther, about, is there an expert? But I would say to you that one of the places that we encourage you to start is by taking that child to the grocery store and giving them choices. I would always take Jem and I would say, okay, we're going to eat the rainbow today. Or, oh, we have to find a green vegetable because we're going to make whatever. And I need you to find me, and it's like a treasure hunt in the produce aisle. I need you to find me a green vegetable, or give me two so I can make a choice between them, right? And when they are a little bit invested, then you take them home and you show them how to cut it up, right? They have some amazing plastic knives, or they have those gloves that kids can wear so that they can't cut themselves while they're cutting. Get them involved, right? But they are more likely to taste it if they are involved. And if they taste it and they spit it out, you have a non-reaction. You don't say, nope, that's not what we do with that. You don't tell them that there are children starving across the world. You don't, you just, clean it up or ask them to clean it up, but we don't have a reaction to it. We know that science has shown us that it's somewhere between 25 and 100 times that you got to present food and have kids try it before their taste buds will allow them to like it. So we let it go, right? Let it go. That's the theme of today. Let it go. Juice from green beans. It sounds like something I would pass on. I'm not talking about green beans, though. I'm talking about from like beans, from garbanzo beans and kidney beans, that they have, they have gas in them. Beans have gas in them. And so the water that they sit in the cans, it's called like aquafab or something like that. If somebody knows, write in and tell me what the name of it is. But, if usually you rinse beans and you rinse and rinse and rinse and you see bubbles come up. It looks like there's soap in them. And those bubbles can be turned into something like a whipped cream, but you will toot yourself into oblivion. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm telling you not to do it. No, but green beans an entirely different thing. I don't think they have bubbles in them. But involve your family and decide how you're going to involve them from the beginning. Really, especially, you might have done some shopping for the non-perishables, but we're getting into the time where we're going to go shopping for the vegetables and things. That's a great time to involve the family. Your husband likes to watch the football games and isn't involved. Make him in charge of one thing and it could be, getting the ice. They don't have to be cooking. Now, it could be that they're in charge of the turkey. A lot of the guys, they're like, the turkey is mine. I'm going to cook the turkey, and that's going to be the thing. Whatever flips somebody's switch, but let's get everybody involved in the planning, the setup, the doing, so that when we sit down to eat, everybody already feels involved. And it's going to look different for every single family, but ask yourself the question as you're planning it, how do I include them? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Oh my God, this is like one of the most important things that I have to say to people. I don't know what the mass insanity is that people eat Thanksgiving dinner at 2:00 in the afternoon. This is a recipe for disaster, especially for our kids, but I think it's a recipe disaster for everybody. I literally think this is one of those ridiculous things that we just do because we've all done it forever, but I literally think that it's because it's 2:00 because the moms got up in the morning and they, in 1952, put the turkey in the oven, and the turkey had to cook, and it was going to be done at 1:00, which meant that it had to rest. And so we were going to eat dinner at 2:00. And why? Because you can get up in the morning and you can have a lovely little breakfast and go do something and put the turkey in later and have dinner or lunch if you want to get up early and have the turkey start early. But eating at 2:00 is a recipe for disaster because people are going to be hungry, on edge. Their blood sugar is going to be low. It's unrealistic for a lot of people. I have seen people, grown adults, not on the spectrum, have a panic attack because they were eating at 3:00 and they didn't realize that their blood sugar had dropped so much that they had a panic attack. We gave them some orange juice and they were fine. Imagine that in the body of a little kid who does not understand all the things that they're feeling. You want a tantrum? Eat at 2:00 and don't. Listen, if you're going to somebody's house and they're eating at 2:00, save yourself. Feed your child at noon. Feed them a regular meal at noon. And then let them sit at the table and push their food around and don't care if they eat it all. But don't make your child wait till 2:00. Or, I know a lot of people that get up and they eat pie for breakfast. So now you've had sugar and then wait till 2:00. Oh, watch the fireworks. Watch everybody get mad and start grabbing at each other. It is a recipe for disaster. Don't eat at crazy times. If you're in control of it, eat at regular times. You can have a full Thanksgiving dinner at noon or at 5:00 or 6:00, 7:00, whatever time you normally eat dinner. But if you have to because you're on somebody else's timetable, feed your child on the spectrum when you would normally eat them. Normally feed them, you're not going to eat them. Feed them when you would normally feed them, and then put a plate of food in front of them, but they're not going to eat it, and that's okay. Don't get emotional about it, right? Okay, on to the next slide. So this is part and parcel of what we were just talking about. Have absolutely no expectations of how much your child's going to eat, whether it's that you fed them before or you didn't, because the sensory that comes around Thanksgiving is entirely different than the sensory for any other meal. You might have extra people at your table. The tablecloth might be different. The dishes might be different. You might be at somebody else's house. There might be 40 people sitting with you, right? If your child is tuned into all of that, they may not eat anything. They may literally not even get anything in their mouth because they're watching what's happening. Let go of the expectation that they're going to eat. And we're going to talk about this on the next slide about informing other people to let go of that too. Don't let anybody bully your child, right? But it starts with you. And, it's possible that your child will eat later on. Don't get emotionally attached to them eating with everybody at the table. Get emotionally attached to them being at the table and just physically being a part of that. And you can encourage them to, sip their apple juice or whatever it is that they're having to drink. But don't push the food if they're not into it. They'll eat when they're going to eat. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Give sensory breaks. It is a sensory nightmare for everyone. I know we all think of it as just being this wonderful time and the house smells all wonderful, but it adds up to all the other sensory things. So we have to give sensory breaks, by the way, to ourselves as well. Plan them in. If you're at other people's houses, find the bathroom that's far away from everybody, that's a safe place, that if you need to take your child and go hang out in the bathroom for 15 minutes and bring it down a notch, do it. Like schedule it in so that you know that your child isn't going to be on 11 when it comes time to sit down at the table or when it's time to finish cleaning up, when it's all the clanking. Oh, that's a sensory. It's a lot. Okay, on to the next one. We're getting close on time. Okay, I really encourage you to give a warning to everyone that you are going to be having dinner with about what you're doing and what you're bringing. I mentioned before that if you're going to bring food that, like, let's say you're going and there's 40 people that are going to be there and you were assigned to bring the mashed potatoes, but you're going to bring 2 or 3 or 4 turkey legs because your child can't have butter, right? I encourage you, I beg you, to let people know. I'm bringing that so that we don't have to have the emotional thing. I don't know why some people feel like if you bring food that you weren't assigned, that you're saying that their food is no good. I don't know why. But if you give them time ahead of time, they can deal with those feelings and then hopefully get through it, with the dinner. But also saying to relatives, listen, my child, we've changed my child's diet. It's a little bit bumpy. I would really appreciate it if nobody forced food on him or her or, commented on her food or his food. Don't just leave him alone about it. Some people won't be able to do it. And you're like, okay, well, I told you, but you couldn't do it. Right. But some people will take it to heart and go, oh, I'm glad to know, because I wouldn't have known. And I might have said something like, hey, don't you want to eat that turkey? Which is innocuous, right? But it adds up. So tell people what you're doing. Don't let them guess. Let them know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Okay, I think we've got 1 or 2 more slides left. Do we? Or is that it? That's it. Because that one slide was supposed to be the last one, which is, let's remember that Thanksgiving is supposed to be about gratitude and connection. We make it about the food. We do. And food is love. Let's all accept that it's a primary reinforcer, right? And we have all these memories packed into it. But if you can remind yourself minute by minute and say, what is it about right now? It's not about you cooking for 14 hours. I don't know if you've seen the episode. There it is. I don't know if you've seen the episode. Oopsie, I'm throwing things. Of The Bear, that Jamie Lee Curtis won the Emmy for. It's called The Seven Fishes. I think it's season 2. It might be episode 6 or 7. But it's basically a mom who has the meltdown of all meltdowns because she's trying to cook the dinner for 7 fishes for Christmas Eve. Let's not be Jamie Lee Curtis. Let's not be so tired that by the time we sit down to the table, we're too tired to be present, right? Let's not overspend on food that nobody wants, but it's just a tradition. Let's not cook 17 versions of something because one person has a dietary restriction. The things that I showed you are the things that because I remember when I used to do that. I used to cook 3 separate meals for our dinner, one for me, one for my son, one for my husband, because we were all eating different. And I've learned you just don't have to do that. My husband is on the scale of picky eaters. My husband wins, and he is the pickiest of picky eaters. He looks at a green bean and he goes, "Why do I have to?" But if you put enough crispy onions and things on it, he'll eat the green beans and love them. So but we're able to make a gluten-free pie, and I serve it to people nobody knows because that pie crust is that good. And it's all about really, pie crust is important, but it's more about what's in the pie, right? Which is a metaphor for the whole thing. I know that we're like, well, but it's got to be turkey. It's got to be this. It's got to be whatever. You can do it. Just keep it simple and remind yourself that it's not really as much about the food as we make it out to be. That it really is about gratitude and connection. I happened to, on Facebook this morning, I used to blog, and I used to blog a lot and write, especially around the holidays, and I might have to repost it, but it was from 13 years ago that I had written a post about Happy Thanksgiving with tinsel on it, and that I had walked into a grocery store expecting to be bombarded with Thanksgiving stuff that was going to remind me to buy a turkey, but the store was filled with Christmas. And then it was a little bit of a shock to me because there was a time and a place when we didn't put up anything Christmas until the day after Thanksgiving, but it stopped like 14, 15 years ago. And it kind of took me back because I was like, hey, I kind of need the stores to remind me this is the month I'm supposed to be grateful. And through the process of the blog, I had the realization that it's kind of the Grinch thing, that Thanksgiving doesn't come from a store. Thanksgiving comes from a feeling inside of stopping for a moment and realizing all the things we have. And at the same time that I was writing this blog, there was a girl that I went to high school with, and her family had posted for her because she had a kind of cancer that had incapacitated her to the point where she could not be on Facebook anymore. And she subsequently died the next week. Very, very sad, very young. But it was a reminder to me that the things that we tend to, while we're busy, while we're in this portion of our lives where we're so busy, and I know when you've got kiddos on the spectrum, you are so busy. You're driving them here, you're doing this, you're doing that, and there's a list of things that you're like, I'm never going to be able to do all of the things. I just want to remind you that this is the good stuff right now. And that sometimes it takes something external to happen to show us that, we would pick this any day of the week. And I will tell you from the perspective of now having a 21-year-old who's about to graduate from college, if I could take anything back, if I could do anything differently, I would enjoy more of the time period when he was younger, even though it was rush to speech, it was rush to OT, it was, rush, to do ABA, it was rush to get to the grocery store, it was rush, 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 rush. I know it can be such a treadmill, but every once in a while you get an opportunity to slow it down a little bit. This holiday can be, if you keep it simple, it can be an opportunity to slow it down a little bit. Now, we spend hours in the kitchen to cook with the hope that the next couple of days will be leftovers and you won't have to cook anything. And it doesn't always work out that way, right? Don't chain yourself to the stove. If you can, a lot of times now they have stores that just sell a pre-cooked dinner. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Take care of yourself. Take care of your kiddos. Find that connection and tune into the gratitude. It's so much easier to look at all the things you don't have, but take a minute to think of all the things you do have. Things could be a lot worse. I remember, oh yes, and Autism Journey with Elijah, thank you for bringing that up. We feed homeless on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Here in Los Angeles and a lot of cities, we have something called Gobble Gobble Give. And this is the tradition in my family that started because my husband usually has to work. And he does on this Thanksgiving. He's working. Don't feel sorry for us. He has a wonderful job and gets to make magic and really wonderful memories for families that are at Universal Studios celebrating their Thanksgiving there. And he loves that, and we get to be with him later on in the day. But my son and I get up early on Thanksgiving morning, and I don't put the turkey in early because we're not going to eat it too, because that's crazy. But I make a dish that is not gluten-free and is not dairy-free, but it was one of my mother's signature recipes that's a scalloped corn. And I make 2 big, huge vats of it. And my son and I, for over 10 years, even in the pandemic, we drive it down. And there's a whole setup where they take food and they plate it up and they drive it out to homeless people in the city and feed them. It's a really wonderful thing. And some people are just drivers and they drive it and give it out. Other people bake, and I bake because I know when I go to bed on Thanksgiving night that my mom's favorite dish got into the bellies of people and then they went, oh, that was good. So yes, that's a wonderful thing to do. And that's a wonderful thing to include your children in. When we started doing this, Jem would help me just with a little bit of preparation around making the dishes. Now he's, lifting and toting these huge vats of scalloped corn and helping to get them out of the car, and is like, we're doing Gobble Gobble Give this year, right? So it's part of his tradition too, which is that giving back thing. However you can. Yes. So thank you, Autism Journey with Elijah, for reminding me of that, and include your kiddos because that's an important thing to do. All right, we're here at the end. We are back next week with shows on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Tuesday and Wednesday, that's the Festival of Toys, where we are going to showcase some of our favorite toys. Remember that on Tuesday, it is going to be the baby, toddler, and preschool. And then on Wednesday, it's everything else. Do check out the toy guide. And I encourage you, I know I've started to look at some of the early Black Friday stuff, and some of the things in the toy guide are on sale. There's some great sales, going on for Black Friday. So definitely check those out. But we'll be back here on Monday with a live show, and then Festival of Toys on Tuesday and Wednesday. No Ask Dr. Doreen this week, but next week, I mean. But we will see you on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Remember, keep it simple. All right, bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.